Hello, everyone, and hope you're doing great today, this final Tuesday of January 2025. Wow, just like that, it's 4 weeks already. It's 4 Tuesdays already. What a joy, what a delight, what a privilege to be with you on this fourth episode of Developing National Innovative Systems for Absorptive Capacity. My name is Tolu Omodara, and this is Amobi Radio Communications. Hope you've been doing well. Hope you've had a good week thus far. Hope you've had a great month thus far as well. And hope you're also preparing for the month of February. Once again, you're very welcome to the fourth episode, to the fourth edition of the program, Developing National Innovation Systems for Absorptive Capacity, this beautiful Tuesday, January 28, 2025. So, today we are going to be discussing the concluding part of innovation as coordination. If you're here with us last week, or if you have listened on YouTube since we uploaded it, you would see that last week we discussed the fact that innovation is coordination. Very, very, very important. We had been alluding to the fact that innovation is coordination from the very beginning of the program, where we define it as a system. Remember, on the very first edition of the program, we talked about the fact that it's a system. The system meaning that if any of the parts, right, if any of the components of the system were functioning in silo, we would still not have a national innovation system, right? So all the component parts that fields that come together to make the national innovation system must be functioning effectively and coordinatedly, if I can use that word. Extremely important. A national innovation system is a system. We've been saying it from the beginning. And then last week we took time to, highlight some aspects of the coordination that must be in place for innovation to be, optimum, for it to build or to it to translate into optimal absorptive capacity, which is the ability of nations to derive maximum economic and social development outcomes from their innovative pursuits, from their creative pursuits. Extremely important. We emphasized this from the beginning of the program, and then a lot last week. We talked about the fact that innovation is coordination, right? If the different parts of the system are not functioning coordinatedly, they are not functioning collaboratively, you would not have innovation. In previous episodes of the program before last week, we had looked at the coordination that needs to happen between the town and gown, so we didn't speak much to that last week. Town and gown there, of course, meaning the academia and the industry, right? Because a lot of initial thinking begins with the academia. However, when it comes to the testing, which is very important, the piloting, the experimenting, right? Given the fact that innovation is often about creation and recreation, when it comes to the recreating part of it, oftentimes industry is required because the using of the initial innovative products, the initial creative output is often done through industry, right? It's industry that will sell the innovation to the market, and oftentimes the feedback that academia needs to fine-tune, to perfect, will typically come from industry. So we earlier talked about the criticality of that coordination between town and gown. And so last week we dwelt more on another kind of innovation, right? We talked about the fact that many times when you're creating a system, right? When you're developing a system, there are often many component parts, right? And the designers of the different components of an overall system need to coordinate effectively in order to ensure that the innovative product functions optimally. And we gave a very simple example last week. We gave the example of the aircraft, right? An aircraft sometimes is made up of components that could be supplied by up to thousands of elements, right? Sometimes one aircraft producer could be dependent on literally thousands of suppliers, because there are different parts of the aircraft, right? Different parts of the airplane, and that coordination has to be done effectively. We talked about the fact that the larger the system being designed, sometimes the more critical the coordination, right? It's important because the creativity and the innovation required to design a part of a large system sometimes is equal to developing a completely whole product on its own, right? And so it's not just about designing the system, but it's also about designing the different components parts in a manner that syncs, right? That syncs effectively, and also assembling the different components effectively. All of these things are very important, and that if that coordination is not done well, you may not attain optimum outcomes from the innovation. So innovation is coordination, right? The absorptive capacity, the economic performance expected from innovation will not come until innovation has been scaled. That's the point we made last week. Many times when the initial invention is created, it's just the beginning, right? To really get optimum economic performance, there must be scaling. But to be able to scale, you must first experiment, you must first test, right? And like I said, in testing, there must be feedback. And even that feedback requires coordination, right? Very, very important. And again, many times it's not the person that creates who scales. We also said that last week. So it's important that there is effective coordination between the creator and those who are engaged in scaling, who tend to be more on the industry and market side, like I said already. So the National Innovation System is very crucial to enhancing the creative outputs and optimizing them, but this cannot be done without effective coordination, right? So we talked about those coordinating points, like I said, and last week we focused a lot on system designers and component suppliers, right? Especially when it comes to the managing of more complex products like airplanes. There will be need for excellent top-notch coordination between the component suppliers and the system designers and assemblers. Now, it's very interesting that between last week and now, we've had, quote and unquote, some artificial intelligence drama or some drama in the artificial intelligence industry, which illustrates this point about what happens when there is no effective coordination between components and component suppliers, but before I talk about that, let me quickly introduce one of the kind of coordination that I think it's important, and that is transnational coordination. Trust me, I don't intend to get into conversations about trade issues, trade wars, and so on and so forth. But in talking about the coordination, in researching different kinds of coordination required, the truth is that this is another kind of coordination that is important for today's world. Now, there is a thin line between the transnational coordination and protection of national interests. I need to say that. Or there is a line, let me put it that way. I don't know how thin the line is, but there is definitely a line between transnational coordination and protecting your own national interests, right? But the truth is that over the decades, for there to be effective innovation, there has been a need for transnational coordination, right? Sometimes things will be developed, for instance, in the United States, or they'll be sold in Europe, and then they'll be tested more in the European markets. And sometimes things would actually be begun in Europe, right? And the scaling would be in the United States, right? And sometimes things would also even be perfected in Asia, in countries like Japan, in countries like South Korea, in countries like Taiwan, and so on and so forth, right? So over the decades, the more humanity has been able to have the level of transnational coordination that is safe for their different national interests, we have often had more effective coordination. And I'll give you a very real example, now going back to the AI drama, if I can put it that way, that has been unfolding within the last 2 weeks, right? Now, I was talking about the need for component suppliers and assemblers to coordinate, right? So the United States had largely been responsible for producing chips for artificial intelligence machines like ChatGPT and so on and so forth, right? And as a way of maintaining their lead, their perceived lead, right, the United States, through the outgone President Biden, I think 2 Mondays ago, on January 13, 2025, if I'm not wrong, they had issued an order restricting the sale. I mean, this had been going on since about 2022, but on January 13, 2025, one of the last things President Biden did was to issue an order restricting the sales of these components that are required for a country like China to produce their artificial intelligence machines and artificial intelligence, hardware and so on and so forth, right? And this was supposed to give the United States, like I said, a perceived lead, right? And so you could almost say there was zero coordination, zero transnational coordination. Like I said, I'm not going into the issues about trade war. I'm not going into the issue about where the line is between transnational coordination and protecting your own national interests, right? After all, this is about national innovation systems. However, I am maintaining my claim that there is a level of transnational coordination that has led to greater innovation for humanity in times past. Now, in this case, what the Chinese did was to have responded very innovatively. And I think that the answer, the response of the Chinese market has thrown the United States into into a state that they thought they had time to get to. I was listening to some of the sessions at the World Economic Forum in Davos last week. The World Economic Forum holds the annual session, like many of us will probably know, every January. They'll bring world leaders together, presidents, leaders of industry, and so on and so forth. So on one of the sessions on tech at the World Economic Forum, they had brought some of the world's leaders, like I think the CEO of Uber, a chancellor in a particular country, and I think one of the leaders in Google, and I remember the lady who was from Google, she was saying particularly that the United States had probably about a year, right, that the United States was losing its leadership of the technology revolution, and they probably had about a year. And that was the general consensus. But by the time it was 1 week into the launch of this disruptive artificial intelligence product called DeepSeek, I doubt if we're to rewind to last week at the WEF, at the World Economic Forum, I doubt if the assessment would still be that the United States has about a year to catch up with, has about a year of lead, right? And specifically, this was in comparison with China, like. I believe, like, at that time, the assessment was that the United States had at least about a year. But even that itself was a cause for concern, right? During that panel, most of the panelists agreed that the United States had to do more to invest in technology, to be ahead, to maintain its lead, and so on and so forth. But here comes DeepSeek. DeepSeek was launched about a week ago, and believe me, as at today, the value of, I think, components, chip maker Nvidia, if I'm not wrong, had gone down to, as at yesterday, beg your pardon, Monday, January 27, the value had gone down by about $500 billion. About $500 billion had been lost, right? Because the moment this disruptive AI product was launched, right, and it was able to provide a response, an innovative response to the lack of transnational coordination, if I'll put it that way, between the United States chip makers, between the United States as the home base of chip makers, which is a component maker, and China. What they did was that they found an innovative response, they found a creative response to that, and more or less may have bypassed their need for the component makers. And of course, the investors began to pull out of a number of these artificial intelligence companies, especially those, including those that were providing these chips, right? Now, again, like I said, I am not saying that there should be transnational coordination at the risk of national interest, but there needs to be the kind of transnational coordination that ensures that humanity is moving forward. And I need to say something here. As a matter of fact, I think the leaders of NVIDIA actually responded to this move by the Biden administration, right? They actually responded and they raised an alarm that this move could, diminish the lead of the United States. Except that I think that by the time they were making this response, it was too late, right? That lack of coordination between component manufacturers or component suppliers, that especially the lack of the transnational coordination between component suppliers and those who needed it, led to an innovative response that definitely has challenged the lead of the United States in artificial intelligence. Let me tell you a little bit about DeepSeek. So, in case you don't know, there have been artificial intelligence products by the United States that have two distinct disadvantages right now compared to compared to DeepSeek, right? The first one is, of course, especially the cost of energy. One of the things, I think next week we'll be having a guest on the program by God's grace, and we're going to look at the role of policy in stimulating innovation. One of the things we'll be discussing is, of course, or we'll be referencing is the cost of energy, right? Or what artificial intelligence has definitely led to an upsurge in the demand for energy, right? Because artificial intelligence will lead to more data centers, and data centers consume a lot of energy. Now, this DeepSeek has been able to provide much less expensive energy for these artificial intelligence products compared to the cost of what their US rivals like ChatGPT, like what is being produced by Google, like what's being, I think, contemplated or produced by Meta, that's the owners of Facebook, and so on. As a matter of fact, I think the US companies have been spending probably hundreds of millions or billions of dollars, but DeepSeek was able to find an innovative way, and I think they are spending just about $50 million, which is significantly less, I would say, probably close to 90% less, if I were to put a rough estimate, compared to what their US rivals have been spending on powering these artificial intelligence products. Can you imagine that? And that's because they found a way to deal with the lack of transnational coordination as regards components suppliers and system designers, right? And those behind the DeepSeek, they said, it wasn't that there was no money to get the products, right? It wasn't that there wasn't money to get one of the components, in this case, the AI chips, right? Or the chips needed for the AI. But it was just a national policy issue where the United States was not going to have those chips supplied to them, and they had to get to work. They had to think creatively. They had to think innovatively. A couple of things really interested me in what they did, right? One of the things, like I said, I'm looking at this episode is looking at the conclusion of innovation as coordination. In this case, there was a lack of coordination, and that lack of coordination almost led to a crisis for the Chinese market, Chinese artificial intelligence market, because they were not getting the components they needed, right? But what this innovative company did was to respond creatively, and they decided to, they decided to create, and innovate in response to the crisis. But no doubt, the point I'm making first and foremost is that when there is no adequate, or where there is inadequate transnational coordination, it creates crisis for innovation, right? And that was what one of the leaders in NVIDIA was saying when they complained about what the Biden administration did when they unveiled the last round of artificial intelligence chip curbs aimed at China and Russia. Like I said, to their credit, they actually flagged the issue. Tech giants NVIDIA, which is the world's largest provider of processors that power AI, and Oracle, they actually accused the Biden administration of bureaucratic overreach, and they said that this would harm the US competitiveness. I haven't spoken with them, I haven't interviewed them, but I dare say that they could anticipate a creative response from the markets that were being denied this component. This is still Tolu Omodara and Amoge Radio Communications. This is the concluding part of innovation as coordination on this program developing national innovation systems for absorptive capacity. Last week, we began to look at what the need for effective coordination between component suppliers and system designers who would need some of those components. And today I was going to talk about transnational coordination. We're looking at it, and we have a very real case in our hands. Today, thankfully, there is an innovative response, but before the innovative response, there was a crisis, right? That lack of transnational coordination and that lack of coordination between component suppliers and the users, right? The assemblers, the system designers, did lead to a crisis. But thankfully, I say thankfully for humanity, right? Because what has now happened is that the DeepSeek manufacturer, the DeepSeek innovators, let me put it that way, they decided to bypass that challenge. They more or less turned that challenge, that crisis, into an innovative opportunity, right? So before then, what happened was that there was a model, right? The American model was such that those chips were needed. So what they did in DeepSeek was to say, you know what, let's find another way. Let's revamp the foundational structure of AI models, and this help them to use the limited resources more efficiently. Because it was not about money. They had the money, but the American market was not going to release these chips to them, not even to any other country that could get it to them, right? Because I think that the Biden administration also kind of decided to limit the supply of chips even to third-party countries that they could get it through. So they looked at it and they said, you know what, we are definitely going to find a way to bypass the need for the chips. So that before DeepSeek, right, what had been was that, many other Chinese AI companies were still working with the American model, right? And so they were not able to solve that challenge. To a large extent, the crisis continued, right? It was not about funding, like I said, but there was an export control on advanced chips, right? And what DeepSeek decided to do was to find more efficient models, more efficient methods to train their models. So they took the model architecture using a battery of engineering tricks, right? They use different engineering chips, custom communication schemes between chips, reducing the size of fields to save memory, and they also, deployed a creative use of mix of models approach. This was said by Wendy Chang, a software engineer turned policy analyst at the Mercator Institute for China Studies. This person has been studying innovation in China, right? But one thing that Wendy Chang said that I really like, said many of these approaches are not new ideas, but combining them successfully to produce a cutting-edge model is a remarkable feat. I'll say that again. So Wendy Chang has said when DeepSeek came up with more efficient models to train their model, more efficient methods to train their model, what they did was that they optimized their model architecture using a battery of engineering tricks, custom communication schemes between chips, reducing the size of fields to save memory, and they also used an innovative mix of models approach. This is the analysis made by Wendy Chang, who is a software engineer that has now turned policy analyst at the Mercator Institute for China Studies, right? She used to be a software engineer only, now she has become a policy analyst. So she was saying that this battery of tricks they came up with to essentially limit their need for the chips that the American suppliers were restricted from exporting to them. She said when they used these tricks, it wasn't new. Many of these approaches aren't new ideas, but what DeepSeek did was that they were able to combine them successfully to produce a cutting-edge model. That, she said, was the remarkable thing. Now, of course, if you're following me, you will know why this struck me, because again, this is about effective coordination. Extremely important. They were not doing anything new. So in other words, DeepSeek was not the first organization in China that had tried to minimize their dependency on the chips that were supposed to have been supplied by the American market, that the American government was restricting export of. They were not the first, but they were obviously the first to coordinate this mix of tricks, this mix of methods to reduce their need for the chips optimally because of effective coordination. Now, this is not me. I hadn't read this person. I hadn't read Wendy Changa's last week when I said innovation is coordination. As a matter of fact, the American market, the American artificial intelligence market had not lost about $500 billion in value because investors pulled out immediately DeepSeek was launched. As at the time I was talking about innovation as coordination. But that's just what happens, right? Thankfully, like I said, when I say thankfully here, I'm neither for nor against, but this is what is best for humanity. Thankfully, the DeepSeek was able to bypass the need for chips. And I want to talk a little bit, I need to say some things here that really resonated with me when I looked at what they did. Now, one thing about DeepSeek, you can read more about them, is they also had the right motives. This is very, very, very important to me, right? So the leader of DeepSeek used to be in finance, right? More or less, it was not initially into artificial intelligence. It was more into something like, if you want to say something like fintech, right? That's financial technology, right? So this was a Chinese quant hedge fund founder, Liang Wenfeng, that went into AI research. So it took just 10,000 NVIDIA chips that had been available. That was all they were allowed to import. And he assembled a team of young, ambitious talent. You know, when I was reading this story, I really loved all the things this person did. The name again is Liang Wenfeng. I hope I'm pronouncing the name well. When Liang Wenfeng went into artificial intelligence research, it was not about the money, because Liang Wenfeng realized that the American artificial intelligence market already had a lead, right? The American intelligence market already had an edge, and for them to overcome that edge, it was important to compete on something that would help them crash the price, right? And so they decided to, from ab initio, they knew that they were going to have to supply for free what the African artificial intelligence market was charging. Well, I think up to last week, they would probably charge about $200 per month for subscription of the more intelligent artificial intelligence products, especially the ones that were high on reasoning, right? There are some that are much more intelligent now. And so what they did, I mean, when they started, many people would have looked at Liang and, oh, Liang has a master's in computer science, right? And they will wonder, why are you deciding to put your fund resources into a new company that would build cutting edge models? Because this was 2023, right? It almost looked impossible. Remember, they were not even getting the chips. But what he did that I really like, he decided to say, you know, I'm not going to pursue the commercial path. And that's one thing about innovation. Innovation, I've said it before on this program, many times may not bring immediate financial rewards. At a point, you will have to recreate to find that path to economic performance, right? But initially, and that's why we've been talking about the need for government, for private sector, and for so many other actors, stakeholders to collaborate to fund innovation. Really, really important. You know, so Liang did not go into this for the immediate commercial rewards. And therefore, in recruiting those who were going to work with him, Liang also did something that I thought was very, very important. So when he was going to put together DeepSeek's research team, he also did not look for the typical experienced engineers who would build a consumer-facing product, because he needed people who were going to have a new thinking. I'm begging you as a listen to me, whether you are a policy formulator, or you're a policy executor, or you're a policy influencer, or you're a policy demander, remember, innovation is about challenging existing assumptions and traditions. It's never been done before, should never limit you. Look, I'm very passionate about this topic. You must be ready to push existing boundaries. Innovation is about creating. It's not about doing what has been done before. It's about creating and recreating. Even what has been done before, you must be ready to try it in new ways. Many other people in the artificial intelligence market in China were limited by the non-supply of those chips. And as as they were concerned, there was no way around it. But this young man, this Liam with a different thinking, did not just have a different thinking, he allowed that to also guide his selection, right? So he was not looking for the typical experience engineers. And don't get me wrong, I'm not against experience, but I'm against the kind of experience that puts you in a box. I'm sure you probably heard the expression, think outside the box. It's important to even identify the box, right? So he was looking for those who are going to be able to challenge existing models, who are going to believe that it was possible to recreate the architecture that more or less made them enslaved to those who were refusing to export the chips that were needed. He was ready to recreate the architecture. And when he brought these young minds, so he decided to focus on PhD students from China's top universities. Take note of that too. Today we have a lot of Chinese students being trained in America, but he decided to focus on those who were trained in China, right? We decided to focus on those who were trained in Chinese universities like Peking University and Tsinghua University, who were eager to prove themselves. Take note of that. There's a lot I can talk about here. I've always believed in talent development programs. I was raised in one about 20 years ago. In Amogate, we have what we call the Amogate Program for Talent. We've hired people straight from school. We've had them work with us for 10 years. We believe in pouring ourselves into the next generation because many times they come with a clean slate. It's easier to mold and remold. We often find them, malleable. And we also talk to organizations, let us help you implement talent management programs. There's a whole lot you can do with a fresh mind that you cannot do with a mind that is too set in his or her ways. So he decided to reach out to these young minds who were eager to prove themselves. Many of them had published in top journals and won awards at international conferences, but they needed industry experience. Very, very important. So what Liang did was that those technical positions, they had them filled by those who had graduated only in the last 2 years. I remember the first, the management training program, international management training program I was brought on 20 years ago. There was an age limit because they were really looking for young and impressionable minds, right? Of course, we also have the Amogate management program. Don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that you can't do this at a higher level. We have the Amogate program for talent for the young, fresh ones. We also have the Amogate management program for middle-level managers. But what is important is that even in selecting the middle-level managers, we want to be sure that they are highly impressionable. They are not set in their ways, they are open, they are those that are ready to challenge existing assumptions and do new things. So because of this hiring strategy, they were able to create a collaborative company culture. We are back to coordination, right? Because these people are not set in their ways, they are not carrying over all kinds of behavioral incompetencies that will be a hindrance to coordination. This hiring strategy helped them to create a collaborative company culture where people were able to use, computing resources to pursue unorthodox research projects because they were about to break the existing model. They were about to challenge the architecture, the model that made them enslaved to those who were not going to export the components they needed. Please, I want you to take note of the lessons here. What are the lessons here for developing a national innovative system? Remember, first of all, innovation is coordination. Today, I said as much as possible, there is a level of transnational coordination that is required for humanity to benefit from innovation. This has been proven in decades past, right? There have been things that have been developed in America and tested in Britain. There were even things that were developed in Germany. There are things that America copied from Germany, right? America, for instance, that the German model for higher education, and they copied it. That was what they did many decades ago, right? And of course, later, the Europeans also came back to copy America's large-scale public finance of university research, right? So there has been a level of transnational coordination over the decades that has actually helped innovation for humanity on a global scale. Again, like I said, there is a line between transnational coordination and protecting your national interest. But to the point where you throw innovation into crisis, I want to question how well it will turn out eventually. right? And so what DeepSeek did, like I said, they did not just, they decided to come out of conventional thinking. Innovation is always breaking the norms, is always challenging existing traditions, is always questioning the boundaries, is always querying the set ways of doing things. And that does not mean you're not taking lessons from the past. Yes, you are taking lessons from the past, but you're also ready to create a new future. Extremely important, right? So I really like the way they responded. The US government, I think it was in October 2022, that they started putting together these export controls that really restricted Chinese artificial intelligence companies from accessing cutting edge chips like NVIDIA's, I think, A100, right? And this was going to be a big problem, except that they were ready to think differently, right? So they did not stick to the existing model. This is a whole topic on its own, recreating existing models. But take note, for you to be able to recreate existing models, you must have a team that is ready to think differently, and it must be ready to work collaboratively. We are big on this in Amogate. You cannot, I mean, he looked at one of the things that they looked at is that in other Chinese companies, for many other Chinese companies, when they are trying to develop other things, they have teams who are supposed to be collaborating that were actually competing with one another. And so many other Chinese artificial intelligence companies were not able to respond, to the American market, to the American artificial market in a way that shook them more or less. The American artificial intelligence market was literally shaken, especially this week, just 1 week after DeepSeek was launched. Like I said, about $500 billion was lost in artificial intelligence, American artificial intelligence companies. Their value went down by about $500 billion. Interestingly, the same $500 billion that Donald Trump had said he invested was more or less taken out by one innovative organization, an innovative leader who was able to build an innovative team. Extremely important. So DeepSeek looked at, in other words, if you asked me, Liang looked at what had been challenging other artificial intelligence companies in China, and he realized that instead of collaborating, they had teams who were unnecessarily competing with one another, and they were not coordinating effectively, right? So DeepSeek decided to ensure that he was going to hire those who were able to think cooperatively, who were able to think collaboratively, and they came together. And by the time they finished, believe me, we have a different story today. Innovation is coordination. I will continue to say this, extremely important. Extremely important. DeepSeek revamped the foundational structure of AI models, and they use limited resources much more efficiently, right? Like I said, this lack of transnational coordination has led to an unintended outcome of this tech cold war between US and China. I'm sure America did not see this. I mean, when I say America, especially the policy formulators, they did not see this coming. I can't say the private sector didn't see it coming because, like I said, NVIDIA's leaders were already raising an issue about this as at the time when the outcome Biden administration, did more to expand the limitation. They already were saying this could harm America's competitiveness eventually. So for me, I just want us to think about the lessons to take away from this. Innovation is coordination. The coordination includes transnational coordination. Innovation is also coordination at the team level. Extremely important. You cannot have a team that is unnecessarily competitive. This was why a number of artificial intelligence companies in China were able to solve this challenge. And Liang looked at it and took lessons from this. He actually he gave the example of a former intern, a prestigious academic award winner, by the way, who was sabotaging his colleagues' work in order to hoard more computing resources for his team. Can you imagine? So in other artificial intelligence companies in China, their response to the perceived inadequacy they had concluded that, we don't have enough, was to hoard the resources, right? So he looked at that culture and said, no, as long as we have people who are, undermining one another's work, we can't solve this problem problem at a larger level. So Liang was able to build a team that saw the big picture, that we have to create a solution for the whole of China that more or less turns this crisis into an opportunity. And that, for me, is leadership. It takes an innovative leader to build a collaborative culture. And it takes an innovative leader to turn a crisis into an opportunity. It takes an innovative leader to recreate existing model. It takes an innovative leader to challenge assumptions. It takes an innovative leader to recreate the market, because that's exactly what Liang has done, believe me. All of a sudden, the story has changed, right? All because you had an innovative leader who was also collaborating. Innovation is coordination. He was able to ensure that there was that culture of coordination, that culture of collaboration. We are not talking about the transnational level now. We are even talking about the organizational level. That's the level we are addressing now. It's really important to build a team that can ensure that there is effective coordination at the organizational level to build an organization that has a collaborative culture where you're not undermining one another, but you are collaborating, even when you think you don't have enough resources, right? So why this so-called award winner was hiding and hoarding what he thought was inadequate resources when these other artificial intelligence companies in China, in Liang's team, they were thinking, how do we take what appears to be insufficient and make it more than enough for the whole of China? And that's what they did. And all of a sudden, as of today, US stocks had dropped sharply, and chip maker Nvidia lost nearly $600 billion in market value after DeepSeek threatened the what they thought was an impenetrable American technology industry. Wow, I'm highly impressed, right? For me, I'm not just impressed. I was really excited because, like I said, this is what I was just discussing last week, and in a week we saw this 1-year-old startup show that they could create a ChatGPT-like AI model, which is called RI, by the way, and it has all the abilities of ChatGPT, and is operating at a fraction of the cost of OpenAI's, Google, or Meta's popular AI models. Extreme. I was saying that they said they had spent about $50 million. I need to correct myself. It's actually just about $5 million. Beg your pardon, not $50 million. About $5 million on computing power for their base model, while American companies are spending hundreds of millions or billions of dollars. So that means that it's probably just about, in fact, I said 90% less. Well, if they are spending about $5 million, $5.6 million, according to CNN, while American companies are spending hundreds of millions of billions of dollars, then I dare say maybe they have crashed the cost by about 99%. I'm not so sure, but definitely their impact has been huge. If Nvidia has lost about about $600 billion in value, Nasdaq, which is heavy on tech, plunged by 3.1%, the broader S&P 500 fell by 1.5%, and so on and so forth. Well, I am extremely excited to see another real life example of the points and the principles I'm making. What is the lesson here? I think it's extremely important for nations to learn the need for transnational coordination to the extent that is important for humanity, while protecting your own national interests. Like I said, I know there is a line between transnational coordination and the protection of your own national interests, but you also have to ask yourself, how did we get to where we have gotten to thus far, right? You are also leveraging off the innovative creations of other nations, right? There are things America has taken from Germany. There are things America has taken from, I think, Japan. I think Japan introduced a cooperative model that America and I think somewhere I'm not sure whether it was in the 80s or thereabouts, that America and other European countries also try to learn from and to adapt, right? So there is a need for transnational coordination. Let's not deceive ourselves. We have learned and are still learning from one another as different nations. Much as we are going to have national innovation systems, we also need to recognize that there's a global scale at which we are playing now, and it is very important for us to take advantage of the optimality that can come when we have innovation as coordination at the transnational level. Otherwise, what you think can be your gain can actually end up being your pain. It'll be very interesting to see how this continues to unravel. I can imagine that there will be responses. DeepSeek was saying that they had to shut down because they had a massive amount of malicious attacks. Like I said, I can imagine there'll be different kinds of responses. I hope that we have the more ethical responses. I hope we have the more innovative responses, which will benefit humanity, right? How can we respond to this? That's what we should be asking ourselves, right? That's what the American artificial intelligence companies should be asking ourselves, right? How can we respond to innovation with innovation? And Asian companies as well, other Asian companies apart from China, African companies as well, should also make sure that they are also responding. I said it about 2 episodes ago, there is nothing impossible. I said it at the beginning of the program too. Even if you think, oh, we are a little bit far behind, I gave different examples of different nations that appear far behind, but have managed to catch up with innovation. There is no such thing as we are far behind. China appeared far behind as far as these components, these chips were concerned, but they found young, passionate, and also patriotic Chinese. I need to add that because that was another thing Liang did, right? Liang, found those who were motivated enough by the Chinese dream. If I can put it that way, if we have the American dream, we also have the Chinese dream, right? One of the things he found was like, oh, these young researchers that were almost entirely educated in China, they saw it as a patriotic purpose, right, to respond to the US restriction. For them, they took it upon themselves to navigate the US restrictions and to choke points in the critical hardware and software technologies. This was the explanation by Zhang, who is a software engineer turned policy analyst. According to Zhang, their determination to overcome these barriers reflects not only personal ambition, but also a broader commitment to advancing China's position as a global innovation leader. What can Africa take from this? Where are the Africans who are passionate about Africa, who believe in Africa? I am one. I say it proudly. I'm proudly Nigerian. I'm proudly African, but I also think globally, right? It's really important to find those who love their nation enough to say, how can we respond to this? How can we recreate platforms? How can we take advantage of our population, our budding creativity, right? How can we ensure that what is supposed to be a disadvantage becomes an advantage? How can we turn crisis into opportunity? Wow. Well, I think it's on this note. I'm going to draw a curtain on not just this episode, but on innovation as coordination, right? If you're a policymaker and you're listening to me, remember you have a lot of role and you have a lot of responsibility. There is a lot that policy does to enable innovation, to enable the coordination of innovation, even if it is market-led, even if it's academia-led. There is a lot. Policy has a lot of responsibility in driving this coordination, in ensuring optimal coordination. We said it last week and we're repeating it this week, right? And policy also has a lot of role in funding innovation, right? In identifying innovators, very important, like these young Chinese geniuses that were identified, they were supported, they were PhD students. What are you doing to fund PhD studies, right? Extremely important. It's really important. We've emphasized that a lot, especially at the beginning of this program, that a lot of innovation begins in the university. The testing, the experimenting, the feedback, the recreation, of course, happens a lot in industry, and there needs to be a synchronization between town and gown. But a lot of the initial creation, the initial invention begins in university. We gave different examples of that. We gave the example of Brandetel in Germany, who I think came up with the theory of fluid aerodynamics. We've given different examples. So the point is that we also need to fund that innovation, that creation. These geniuses did not just come out of nowhere for Liang to use. They had been trained up to PhD levels. They had written articles. They had attended conferences. They had been supported through that process. And when the time came for them to turn on their innovative lights for China, China benefited from all of that investment in their education. Innovators don't just happen. We've talked a lot about the role of academia. Next week, like I said, we're going to be having a guest who's going to be looking at, who's going to be exploring the role of policy formulation, and we're also going to talk a little bit about implementation, but largely about policy and innovation, right? How do we ensure that we have policies that support innovation, right? Policies that foster innovation, policies that engender innovation. Extremely important. It's going to be interesting. We're going to look at the role of policy in developing responsive national innovation systems. Very important, right? This guy is DeepSeek, Liang, his team. They were responsive to the realities of the export controls by the American market, and they found a way to respond to it in a way that turned crisis into opportunity. It's a very nice, very interesting doing this with you. I look forward to hearing your feedback. I look forward to hearing back from you. Please send us a mail, contact@theamogate.org. Follow us on Facebook, follow us on LinkedIn, follow us on Instagram, and please subscribe to our YouTube page. There's a lot. We have over 100 and I think over 150, if not over 160 videos on different organizational strategy, institutional, national, and transnational issues. And we're going to continue our programs. We have great programs Mondays through Saturdays. On Amogate Radio Communications, we explore very comprehensive, robust, multidimensional issues on the economy, on geopolitics, on so many dimensions, on strategy, on leadership. And we're also going to start looking at information technology issues. My colleague Awoyemi will be coming up on Thursday, right? And he will start looking at digital mastery corporate strategies. Well, on this note, I'm going to say my final goodbye. I thoroughly enjoyed doing this with you. I will be back same time, same station next week. Until then, remember, innovation is about challenging existing assumptions and traditions. You must see no boundaries, right? It is possible, but innovation is also coordination. If you are still undermining one another, instead of collaborating with one another, instead of coordinating effectively, you are not likely to be able to challenge assumptions and traditions and push boundaries. Thank you so very much again. I'll be back same time, same station next week by God's grace. Until then, have a beautiful rest of January. See you next week.